I am writing this because the Inquisitor told me to speak plainly. No hymns, no slogans, no brave ending, just what happened. I was Trooper Havel Lorne, 3rd Platoon, D Company, 91st Vardos Rifles. Vardos is a grey world with thin light and bitter rain. We grow wheat in wind that can cut your lips, and we raise soldiers because the tithe demands it. That part is normal. The part that is not normal is how a whole regiment can rot while still marching in step. It never starts with a daemon in the sky. It starts with a missing crate. On the day we landed on Karon Belt Station, we were told it was a routine pacification, a rebel labor block. A few sabotage cells, some spooked administrators. The brief was clean and confident. The sort of brief that comes from a desk that has never smelled promethium smoke. The station was not a planet. It was a chain of asteroids welded into one long industrial spine. Hab rings, refineries, void docks, old shrines squeezed into pressure corridors. Everything smelled like metal and stale air. The walls sweated. The lighting was always half dim, like the place was tired. We disembarked in order. 2 companies forward. Armor in the second wave. Basilisk platforms stayed on the transport because there was nowhere to deploy them. The Navy officers looked nervous. Our colonel pretended not to notice. First night, we set up in a cargo concourse that used to move ore. The Militarum liaison gave out ration packs and charge cells, and then he told us the rest was delayed. He said the words like they were a prayer. Delayed. We were not worried. Everyone knows the Militarum. Delay is a season of war. Then the delays stacked. Charge packs arrived half full. Medicae supplies arrived with broken seals. Boots arrived in the wrong size. Lasgun barrels came greased with something that smelled wrong and made the metal sticky. When we complained, the liaison said we should be grateful we got anything. A soldier can eat bitterness for a while. We are trained for it. What breaks you is when you realize the bitterness is not an accident. It is a pattern. Second week, we took our first casualties. Not from rebels, from an airlock failure in Tunnel 9. A maintenance crew reported a pressure alarm. They wanted engineering. They got us because we were closer. A squad went in with rebreathers and hazard lamps. The lock cycled open anyway. 3 men were pulled into vacuum before anyone could grab a harness line. The last thing they left behind was the sound of their boots hitting the deck in panic. The station overseer called it an unfortunate incident. He said sabotage was suspected. He said the workers were probably behind it. Our commissar did not like the word probably. Commissars hate soft words. He had 2 workers dragged into the concourse and shot them after a short questioning. No trial, no records. A clean solution to a dirty fear. The workers on the concourse watched and said nothing. Their eyes were flat. I remember that more than the shots. They looked like people who had seen that kind of justice before. That was my first sign that we were late. Not to a war, but to a sickness. Morale started to fray. Quietly, like cloth tearing one thread at a time. Men stopped writing letters, not because they did not want to, because the astropathic queue became a joke. Messages went missing. Replies never came. The vox chatter from higher command turned patchy. Sometimes it sounded like someone breathing over it. Sometimes it cut out right when you needed a grid reference. We started telling ourselves small lies. The Navy is rerouting signals. The astropaths are tired. The station is old. The overseer is corrupt but still loyal. The rebels are scared. We will crush them. Then the little charms appeared. At first it was harmless. A coin with the Emperor's face, worn smooth, passed from one hand to another before patrol. A strip of red cloth tied to a rifle stock. A piece of wire wrapped around a wrist like a bracelet. For luck, they said. For the machine spirit, they said. The regimental priest saw it and frowned. He gave a sermon about true faith. He said the Emperor is not a slot machine you feed with trinkets. The next day, 2 men were found dead in a coolant crawl space. No wounds, no blood, just faces frozen like they had seen something that shut their minds down. The priest was called to bless the bodies. When he returned, he did not preach for 3 days. The charms became less harmless. A squad came back from patrol with a new symbol scratched into their shoulder plates. 8 points, like a star. They claimed it was a station marking, some local hazard sign. They laughed too hard. Their eyes did not meet ours. The commissar noticed. He dragged the squad leader forward and demanded the truth. The squad leader insisted it was nothing. The commissar raised his bolt pistol, and the squad leader started to cry. Not because he feared death, because he feared something else. He said they found a shrine. Not an Imperial shrine, a hidden one behind a false bulkhead. Candles that burned without heat. A mural of a man with too many arms. A bowl of water that showed faces that were not there. The commissar ordered the location burned. He ordered the squad reassigned and watched. He told the rest of us that any talk of it would be treated as sedition. That is how you stop a fire from spreading. You deny it air. That is also how you poison everyone who can smell smoke. After that, men spoke in whispers. About the shrine, about the dead workers, about the airlock, about how the station felt wrong. They did not tell officers. Officers did not want to hear it. A report like that is a career wound. A report like that invites the wrong sort of attention. We still believed the rebellion was the enemy. That made it easier. Rebellion is simple. You shoot it, and it stops. Chaos is not simple. Chaos sits inside a man's hunger and keeps talking until the hunger sounds like truth. Our first real engagement came in the refinery stacks. We moved through catwalks above molten ore runoff. Heat rose in waves. Every step rang on metal. We met resistance. Not militia lines. Not barricades. One man, a thin worker in a stained coat. He stood in the open with empty hands, and he smiled. Our lieutenant shouted for him to stand down. The worker did not move. He lifted his chin like he was offering his throat. Someone fired. I never learned who. The worker fell and the shot echoed for a long time. Then the refinery alarms screamed and every valve opened at once. Boiling steam flooded the catwalks. Men slipped. Men fell. Some burned. Some were trampled in the rush. It was a trap built from the station itself. Only someone with access could do it. That meant workers, or administrators, or us. The commissar called it treachery. The colonel called it sabotage. The overseer called it regret and promised cooperation. 3 days later, the overseer was found dead in his own office, hanging from a cable with a smile carved into his face. I will not describe more than that. The detail is not important. What is important is this. The station did not just kill him. It mocked him. That night our chaplain, not ours, but the station's Ministorum confessor, preached in the main shrine. He said the emperor tests the faithful. He said fear is a sin. He said we must purge weakness from ourselves and from the workers. The words were correct. The tone was wrong. He sounded pleased. The priest from our regiment asked to speak with him privately. I saw them go into the side sacristy. Only one came out. Our priest came out pale, sweating and holding his rosarius like it had turned heavy. He would not say what was spoken. He just ordered us to double the watch, and he asked the commissar for permission to execute any man found with unauthorized symbols. The commissar agreed. Executions started. Quiet ones. A man found with a charm. A man found speaking to a worker too long. A man who woke screaming and could not explain why. We were cutting out infection with a bayonet and calling it medicine. At first it felt like control, then it felt like panic. And panic is a hunger the warp can feed. The breaking point was not a battle, it was isolation. Karon Belt Station went dark on the 10th day of the 3rd week. Not lights. Power stayed on. Life support stayed on. The dark was in the Vox. Long-range communication died. The Navy escort stopped responding. The Astropath choir screamed and then fell silent. The Militarum liaison locked himself in his office and refused to open the door. The colonel assembled company commanders and demanded answers. Tech adepts said there was no external jamming source. The station's arrays were intact. The only explanation was internal sabotage or a warp effect. The word warp was spoken like a curse. The commissar ordered a purge sweep. The priest demanded a penitence march. The colonel demanded discipline. 3 chains of command pulling in 3 directions. That is how a regiment starts to tear, without anyone firing a shot. We were sent into the hab rings to restore order. Order meant curfew. Order meant searches. Order meant bodies. The workers did not resist at first. They obeyed. Too fast, too neatly, like they had been waiting for us to turn into villains so they could stop pretending they were victims. On a patrol through Hab Ring 7, I saw a child standing in a corridor with a toy las pistol carved from scrap. The child aimed it at us and made pew noises. My squad laughed. The child did not. The child said, "He is coming." I asked who. The child pointed toward the ventilation shafts. Then the child ran. That was when I noticed the chanting. It was faint. It came through the walls. It was not one voice. It was many. It was timed, like machinery, like a work song, like a prayer. We found the source behind an access hatch that should have been sealed. Inside was an old maintenance chamber turned into a gathering space. Hundreds of workers packed tight, candles in glass jars, symbols painted on the deck, food laid out like offerings. A robed confessor at the front with a gilded book. The station confessor. He raised his arms and the workers echoed him. I could not hear the full words. My ears rang. My teeth felt wrong, like they were loose. Our sergeant ordered the crowd to disperse. The confessor smiled and said something about freedom, about new masters, about the emperor being a lie, told to keep them hungry. A guardsman fired. Again, I do not know who. The first shot hit the confessor in the chest, and the confessor did not fall. He looked down at the wound like it was interesting. Then he looked back at us and laughed. The workers surged. Not with weapons, with hands, with nails, with teeth, with a strength that did not belong to starving miners. We tried to push back. We fired warning bursts. The crowd did not break. A man grabbed my lasgun and pulled so hard my shoulder nearly popped. Another climbed onto our sergeant's back and bit through his ear guard. Our line collapsed into a brawl. Someone shouted to fall back. The commissar's voice cut in, over Squadvox, furious. No retreat. That order killed more of us than the workers did. A retreat is not shame when your position is impossible. A retreat is survival. But shame is a tool commissars use to keep men from running. He used it even when running was the only sane choice. We lost 8 men in that chamber. Not dead. Taken. I saw it. Workers dragging guardsmen into side tunnels. Not to execute them, to keep them, to recruit them. We withdrew in pieces. We regrouped at a junction where the corridor was wide enough to form a firing line. We held there, breathing hard, hands shaking. The workers did not follow into the open. They melted back into vents and side hatches like the station swallowed them. The colonel was furious. He ordered a full sweep. Armor units were sent in with chimeras that barely fit the corridors. Heavy bolters were mounted at intersections. Search teams moved with flamers and Auspex gear. That is when sabotage started hitting in patterns. A fuel line ruptured right as a chimera rolled over it. Flames filled the corridor. 2 squads were trapped behind it and could not be reached for hours. When we finally cut through the bulkhead, we found their helmets lined up on the deck like trophies. A decay station had its antiseptics replaced with corrosive fluid. Men who came in for minor burns left screaming. A munition cache blew after someone replaced standard fuses with cheap station parts. The explosion took half a platoon and left the rest deaf. Each incident had a report. Each report went nowhere because Vox was dead. Each officer feared the word that would bring an inquisitor. Each officer feared being the one who lost control. So they pretended control still existed. That is the answer to why nobody stopped it. The system trains you to fear failure more than you fear corruption. You can admit casualties. You can admit shortages. You cannot admit taint. Taint means quarantine. It means purges. It means your name becomes a warning. The Confessor's cult understood that fear. They fed it. They started leaving gifts. A crate of fresh ration bars appeared outside our barracks, with a neat Imperial seal. Men devoured them. The next day they were calmer, less hungry, less angry, too calm. A week later, those same men started speaking the same phrases, short lines, repeated at the same moments, like they had rehearsed. We lost our first officer to it, Lieutenant Darn. He was young and proud and wanted to be loved by his men. He listened when they complained. He shared cigarettes with them. He let them talk too freely. One night he called a squad meeting and told them he had a plan to end the war without more blood. He said the workers were not the enemy. He said the real enemy was the people who sent us here. He said the Emperor would understand if we refused a cruel order. That is how it sounds at first. Reasonable, human, almost noble. Then he held up his wrist and showed the 8-point star cut into his skin. He said he had seen the truth in dreams. He said a new dawn was coming. The commissar executed him in front of the company without warning. The body fell hard, and silence followed. Then a guardsman in the back shouted, "Martyr." The commissar turned and shot him too. After that, no one spoke openly. Not in support, not in dissent. Silence settled like dust. Silence is not loyalty. Silence is a hiding place. The cult used it. They started targeting the lonely, the replacements, the ones who felt unseen. They promised warmth. They promised meaning. They promised that the station itself cared. There was one more step before the fall became irreversible. It was the moment we started killing our own people for the wrong reasons. A rumor spread that the second company had gone soft, that they refused to fire on workers, that they were sympathizers. The rumor came from nowhere and everywhere. It moved like a virus through mess halls and watch posts. The colonel ordered second company disarmed pending investigation. The commissar supported it. The priest said it was a test of purity. Second company refused. They did not refuse loudly. They refused quietly by not showing up, by not turning in weapons, by locking hatches. When the colonel sent us to enforce it, we found the company dug in around their barracks, with firing slits cut into bulkheads and choke points rigged with mines. Imperial guardsmen aiming at Imperial guardsmen in a station that was already compromised. That is how chaos wins. It does not need to kill you. It only needs you to kill the wrong target. We called it a standoff. The cult called it a harvest. The colonel ordered us to breach second company's section. He wanted it done fast before the rest of the regiment caught ideas. The commissar wanted a public lesson. The priest wanted a purge that looked like righteousness. No one asked the simplest question: who benefits from us fighting each other? We stacked at the main hatch. Breach charges set. Flamer team ready. I was on the right side with my lasgun tight to my shoulder and my mouth dry. The hatch blew. Smoke rolled out, and then gunfire. Not warning shots, not panic. Controlled volleys. Second company had set overlapping lanes, and they knew exactly where we would enter. 2 men dropped in the first second. A third spun away, clutching his throat. I hit the deck and crawled behind a crate as last bolts snapped overhead. Our sergeant shouted to push in. The commissar's vox screamed again. Forward. A squad tried. They were cut down at the threshold. Then something changed. Over the noise I heard chanting again, not from the worker areas, from inside second company's barricade. I risked a look. They were not just defending. They were kneeling behind the firing line between bursts. Some had blood on their hands like they had marked themselves. Some had that same too calm look. Second company had not just refused disarmament. They had flipped. Not all of them. Enough. A man I recognized, Corporal Jast, stepped into view. He had played cards with my squad last month. He waved with his free hand while his other hand held a lasgun. He shouted, "You do not have to die for them." A bolt pistol barked behind us. The commissar shot one of our own who had hesitated. That was the moment the regiment's center broke, because now we had two monsters in the corridor, one promising freedom, one demanding obedience, both ready to kill us to prove a point. The firefight spread into adjacent corridors. Second company units poured out through maintenance hatches and side doors, hitting our flanks. Some wore worker coats over their armor. Some had symbols painted on their helmets. They knew the station better than we did because the cult had guided them. We were being outmaneuvered inside a maze. The colonel ordered armor forward, but the chimeras could not pass the wreckage at the choke points. He ordered heavy stubbers set up, but the power feeds failed. He ordered a fallback to the concourse, but the concourse doors sealed from inside. Karon Belt Station had chosen a side. I do not mean it was alive like a beast. I mean the people who controlled it were everywhere, and they had prepared for this. The cult struck the command level next. A command runner arrived with a message for the colonel. The runner's hands were clean, too clean. His eyes never blinked. He handed over a data slate. The colonel glanced at it, and then his face twitched like he had been slapped. He stared longer. His jaw tightened. He whispered something I could not hear. Then he shot the runner. That sounds like sanity. A commander stopping a threat. It was not. The colonel kept staring at the slate. He started laughing. Quiet at first, then louder. He called for the priest. The priest came. The colonel showed him the slate. The priest crossed himself and then dropped to his knees like his legs had been cut. The commissar demanded the slate. The colonel refused. They argued. I heard the words heresy and authority and duty. Then the colonel turned his pistol on the commissar. He said, "He is coming." The commissar fired first. The colonel fell. Silence followed. The sort of silence that tells you a line has been crossed that cannot be uncrossed. The commissar took command. Commissars always believe they can hold a regiment together by force. Sometimes they can. Not when the rot is already inside the bones. He ordered us to form a loyal cordon and execute any man without proper identification codes. He ordered the priest to lead litanies over open vox. He ordered the engineers to restore comms. The engineers tried. Their servitors crawled into cable trunks. They chanted Binharik prayers. The arrays stayed dead. Then, the cult made its big move. They opened the refinery vents and pumped hallucinogenic fumes into our barracks sector. I do not know what it was. I know what it did. Men saw things. Some saw home. Some saw dead friends. Some saw light pouring out of bulkheads. Some heard loved ones calling their names. A soldier is trained to endure pain and hunger. We are not trained to endure our own minds turned against us. Units started firing at shadows. Friendly fire rose. Officers tried to shout orders, and their voices were swallowed by panic. I remember stumbling into a corridor and seeing a squad from 5th Platoon aiming at a blank wall. They were crying. They kept saying, "Open the door." There was no door. Then the wall rippled. A shape pushed through it like cloth, and for a second my brain refused to name it. It was tall and wrong, and its outline hurt to focus on. Not a daemon prince, nothing grand. Just a warp thing squeezing into reality because we had opened a wound. The priest screamed the Emperor's name and raised his icon. The icon's light flickered like a dying lumen. The thing laughed without a mouth. Then bolt of fire thundered and tore it apart. The bolt of fire came from a Navy armsman team that had finally cut its way to our sector. They wore void armor with the Aquila Bright. They moved like people trained for this kind of close action. Their officer shouted that the station's outer ring had been breached by a pirate vessel, and now the entire structure was unstable. He said evacuation was underway. He said we had minutes before the hab ring lost spin control. That was the first good news in days, also the worst. Evacuation means order. It also means chaos, because everyone thinks they deserve the first seat. We moved toward the dock concourse in a flood of bodies. Guardsmen, station workers, Navy crew, wounded dragged on stretchers, servitors carrying ammo crates, officers shouting until their voices broke. The cult did not try to stop evacuation. They guided it. They split the crowd with sealed hatches. They funneled loyalists into dead ends. They opened side corridors that led into dark service routes, where squads vanished. I stayed with a group of survivors from my platoon. 6 of us. Our sergeant was dead. Our lieutenant was dead. We followed a corporal because someone had to point. At Dock Gate 3, we met 2nd Company again. Not as a barricade, as a procession. They marched in formation through the smoke, with weapons lowered like they were not afraid of anyone. Behind them came workers carrying icons that were not Imperial. The station confessor walked at the front, still smiling. He looked at the crowd and spoke like a man offering mercy. "Lay down your arms," he said. "Join us. The station will shelter you. The false war will end." Some did. I saw guardsmen step out of the crowd and drop their lasguns. They were tired. They were hungry. They wanted the pain to stop. The confessor touched their foreheads and whispered words. The men's faces smoothed into that too calm look. Then they turned and aimed their eyes at the rest of us like we were the enemy now. That was the midpoint betrayal made visible. The moment the regiment ceased to be a regiment and became a herd. The commissar tried to force a path through with his loyal cordon. He shouted for the Emperor and ordered a charge. He got 3 steps before a shot took him in the back. The shooter was one of his own escorts. The commissar fell and the cordon shattered. That is why nobody stopped it. Because by the time the person with authority understood the scale, he was already surrounded by people who had decided he was the problem. After the commissar fell, the regiment did what humans always do when the ceiling collapses. We broke into tribes. Some clung to the priest. Some clung to the armor crews. Some clung to the navy. Some clung to anyone who looked like a leader. Many clung to the cult because it offered a simple story. You are not failing. You are being freed. My tribe was small. 6 of us became 4. 4 became 3. We did not debate loyalty in speeches. We made choices by running. A Navy armsman grabbed my sleeve and shouted that the evacuation route had shifted to Dock Gate 1. He said Gate 3 was compromised. He looked at the confessor and spat. "That thing is not Militarum," he said. We followed the Navy group through a maintenance corridor that stank of coolant and old food. Behind us we heard singing. Soft, almost beautiful. It echoed down the pipes and made my skin crawl. At a junction we found a wounded guardsman slumped against the wall. He was alive. He looked up and begged us not to leave him. My corporal hesitated. I hesitated too. We were not monsters. Then I saw the 8-point star on the wounded man's palm. Fresh, still wet. He saw me looking and he smiled. He whispered, "Stay." The Navy armsman did not hesitate. He shot the wounded man once and kept moving. I wanted to hate him for it. I could not. If we stopped, we died. We reached Dock Gate 1 and found a scene from a nightmare made of steel. The dock was open to void behind a partial shield. Shuttles were coming and going. Navy crew shouted for order. Loyal guardsmen tried to form lines. Station workers surged in crowds. Above it all, the station shook. You could feel the spin wobble in your bones. The cult had reached the dock too. Not as an army, as a whisper. Workers in the crowd held hands and murmured. Guardsmen near them started to relax, started to lower weapons, started to push others aside with calm faces. The Navy officer at the gate screamed that anyone interfering would be shot. His own armsman started to look at him with slow curiosity like he was a child yelling at the tide. The warp does not always explode. Sometimes it seeps. It makes madness feel like peace. A shuttle landed. The ramp dropped. The Navy shouted for wounded first, then essential crew. It was a fair order. The crowd ignored it. People surged. Someone fell. Others stepped on him without seeing him. A guardsman fired into the air, and a panic wave rolled through the dock. That was when the cult did the cruelest thing. They opened the void. A section of the dock shield flickered. A maintenance lock cycled. Air screamed toward space. Bodies were dragged sideways. Loose gear flew. People slammed into railings. The press of the crowd became a weapon. I grabbed a handhold and held on with everything I had. My fingers cramped. My lungs burned behind the rebreather. In that chaos, the cult moved like it knew exactly where the wind would pull. They slipped through, grabbing specific people, yanking them toward side hatches that led away from evacuation. They were not saving lives, they were selecting. A man beside me lost his grip and vanished into the void stream. He did not even scream. The air stole sound. The shield stabilized after a long minute. The dock looked like a slaughterhouse without blood, just emptiness and scattered boots and drifting debris caught against barriers. The Navy officer was gone, either killed or taken. A new voice came over the dock speakers, warm and steady. The station confessor. He told everyone to stay calm. He told everyone the Emperor's cruelty had ended. He told everyone the station would become a sanctuary if we surrendered. A portion of the crowd cheered. A portion wept. I looked at my remaining 2 comrades. Their eyes were wide. One of them whispered that maybe surrender was smarter than dying. I did not answer with words. I answered by moving. I followed the Navy armsman toward a service ladder that led up to the gantry where small craft docked. We climbed fast. We reached a side bay where a battered cargo lighter sat half-loaded, no pilot, no crew, just a machine spirit humming like it was waiting. The Navy armsman swore. He said the lighter could fly, but it would not clear the station's debris field without help. He said we needed a pilot. Then a woman stepped out from behind crates. She wore Navy coveralls and a sidearm. Her face was streaked with grime. Her hands shook. She said she could fly it. We did not trust her. We had no time to find someone else. We boarded. As we sealed the hatch, the dock speakers switched again. A new sound, a choir, not astropaths, voices. They sang a hymn that started like an Imperial chant and then bent into something else. Notes that did not belong. A rhythm that made my stomach twist. It was the confessor rewriting faith in real time. The pilot's eyes glazed for a second. She smiled. I raised my lasgun. The Navy armsman grabbed the barrel and shook his head hard. Not yet, he mouthed. The lighter lifted. The bay doors opened. We shot out into the void corridor beyond the station. Behind us the hab ring shuddered. A section broke free and spun away, throwing fragments like shrapnel. The pilot corrected course with skill that looked real. We cleared the first debris line. Then she started speaking softly, as if she was talking to a lover. "He is beautiful," she said. He showed me the true light. The Navy armsman drew his sidearm. The pilot turned her head slowly, still flying. "You cannot leave," she said. "You belong now." The lighter dipped toward the station again. The Navy armsman shot her. One clean shot. She slumped forward on the controls and the lighter started to spin. We fought the controls like drowning men. My hands fumbled. I am not a pilot. The armsman was not a pilot. We slammed into a drift of debris and the hull screamed. By luck, or the Emperor's hand, we found stabilization long enough to burn away from the station. We did not fly well. We flew away. Hours later, we were picked up by an Imperial Navy cutter that had been holding outside the comms shadow. They demanded identification. They demanded proof of loyalty. They aimed weapons at us until we spoke regimental codes and the Navy armsman showed his marks. When we were pulled aboard, I collapsed on the deck and laughed until I cried. Not relief, something broken. We were alive. Our regiment was not. I was interrogated for 9 days after rescue. They asked me for names, leaders, symbols, exact timelines. They asked if I had carried charms. They asked if I had heard whispers. They asked if I had ever doubted the Emperor. I answered as best I could. The truth is messy. It does not line up like a parade. They told me later that the Inquisition quarantined Karon Belt Station. They told me later that a purge force was assembled. They told me later that the station was scoured. They did not tell me what they found. Maybe they did not want me to carry it in my head. Maybe they did not want to admit it was worse than they expected. I can still tell you how whole regiments fall. I can tell you the shape of it. It starts with strain, bad rations and tired men and lost messages. A sense that nobody upstairs knows you exist. A sense that you are disposable. Then it adds fear. An accident that feels targeted. Death that looks like mockery. Leadership that reacts with punishment, because punishment is the only tool it trusts. Then it adds silence. Reports that never move. Officers who choose the safe lie over the dangerous truth. Priests who fear being wrong more than they fear being late. Commissars who confuse control with loyalty. Then it adds comfort. A charm that seems to work. A rumor that eases pain. A whisper that tells a lonely man he matters. Chaos is patient. It will give you what you want first. Then it takes your choices. It sets loyalists against loyalists. It turns discipline into cruelty, and cruelty into a recruiting poster. It pushes the regiment into situations where the only way to survive looks like disobedience. It waits for the day your chain of command shoots its own officer in a corridor and calls it duty. After that, the fall is fast. People imagine betrayal as a dramatic moment, a banner raised, a cheer, a speech. Most betrayal is quiet. It is a man lowering his weapon because he is tired. It is a sergeant choosing to falsify a report because he wants to keep his squad from being executed for cowardice. It is a priest telling himself the strange confessor is still faithful because the alternative is to admit he has been preaching beside a monster. Why did nobody stop it? Because the Imperium is built to keep moving. The Militarum must meet quotas. Command must show progress. Commissariat must enforce discipline. Priests must keep faith. Navy must keep lanes open. Everyone has a job, and none of those jobs reward the person who says, "Stop, something is wrong." That person becomes the problem. So the system filters out warnings until the only warnings left are screams. By then, it is too late. The cult has names. It has access. It has habits mapped. It has men inside armor crews, and vox rooms, and med bays. Then it presses one lever. Isolation. No vox. No outside eyes. No quick reinforcements. No higher authority to break the local spiral. In isolation, fear becomes policy, and policy becomes self-destruction. That is how you lose a regiment. Not by one great lie, but by 1,000 small choices made under pressure. I have one more thing to say, because you will ask it anyway. Why did I not fall? I do not have a noble answer. I was too stubborn to believe in comfort that came too easily. I was too frightened of the commissar to accept the cult openly. I was too loyal to my dead friends to let their deaths be rewritten into a joke. Mostly I was lucky. The cult did not pick me early, and later it had bigger prizes. If you want a single warning to give to every regiment, I can give it. When the lucky charms start working, report it. When the priest goes quiet, watch him. When the commissar starts shooting workers to fix problems he cannot explain, ask what he is afraid of. When your vox goes dead and your officers tell you everything is normal, stop believing them. Because the fall does not announce itself. It just keeps walking closer until you look up and realize you are saluting the wrong banner. They kept me in a white room that smelled like antiseptic and machine oil. No windows, no clock. The lights never changed. Time was measured by footsteps in the corridor and the taste of water that came out of a metal tap like it hated being liquid. The first interrogator was a Navy officer with tired eyes. He asked the easy questions. Regimental ID, homeworld, date of deployment, command names, company composition, the sort of things that belong in ledgers. When I answered, he wrote it down, nodded, and left. The second interrogator was not Navy. He wore plain grey, no rank tabs, no medals. He could have been a clerk if you only looked at the fabric. The power was in how the room behaved around him, like it had been trained to stay still. He did not introduce himself. He placed a small vox recorder on the table and set it between us like an offering. "Trooper Lorne," he said, "you will tell me the truth, and you will do it without theatre." His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a bolt pistol held just out of sight. I said I had told the truth already. He nodded once. "You told a truth," he replied. Now tell me the useful one. Then he asked the first question that mattered. When did you first notice the change? I started with the missing crate, because that is where it always starts. He stopped me. Not the supply change, he said, the human change. So I told him about the eyes, about how men stopped complaining in the normal way. Not the gallows humor kind, the quiet kind. About how the station workers watched executions like they were watching weather. About how the station confessor sounded pleased. The man in grey listened like a decay listens to a cough. Not judging, just mapping symptoms. Then he asked about the charms. I admitted I had carried one. A coin. It was stupid and small. A copper disc with the Emperor's profile worn smooth, passed from hand to hand. Everyone touched it before patrol at least once. It was not worship. It was habit. He asked what it felt like. I said it felt like holding a piece of home, even though it came from nowhere. He leaned forward slightly. Did it work, Trooper? That question made my mouth go dry, because the coin did work, in the way poison works. I told him about the patrol on the 8th day, when we should have walked into an ambush and did not. A side corridor collapsed behind us minutes before we passed. If it had held, we would have died. The men joked that the coin saved us. They started touching it more. They started guarding it, like it belonged to them and not the regiment. He nodded again, still calm. And when did it stop feeling harmless? He asked. I told him about the first time a man refused to give it back. Private Ven, thin kid, fresh from Vardos, hands still soft from farm work. He had never stopped looking scared, not even after the first blood. The coin sat in his palm like it was the only warm thing in the station. Our corporal told him to hand it over for inspection. Ven smiled, and the smile was not his. He said, no. The corporal stepped closer. Ven's eyes stayed calm. He said, you do not understand what it is. It is listening. The corporal slapped him, not hard. A correction. Ven did not flinch. He only whispered, he will remember that. That night Ven was found dead in his bunk. No marks, no struggle. Just a look of relief on his face like he had been granted leave. After that, nobody laughed at the coin. Nobody threw it away either. The man in grey asked me why. Why did you keep it, Trooper? I could have lied. I did not. Because when you are starving and tired, and the world feels hostile, anything that feels like help starts looking holy. He tapped a finger once on the table. Yes, he said. That is how it enters. Hunger first. Then he asked about leadership decisions. He did not ask if the colonel was brave. He did not ask if the commissar was cruel. He asked where they were blind. That was harder. Because in the guard you are trained to blame failure on individuals. A coward, a fool, a traitor. It is cleaner than admitting the machine itself can be flawed. So I told him what I saw. The colonel feared being cut off from higher command more than he feared the station itself. Every time he should have pulled out, he doubled down. He kept insisting the situation could be handled with proper discipline. Because admitting it could not be handled would have been admitting he had already lost. The commissar feared loss of control so much he treated every symptom like rebellion. He used executions to silence rumors and did not notice that fear was becoming a recruiting tool. Every shot he fired to prove authority made the cult's promises sound kinder. The priest feared scandal. That sounds petty until you understand what scandal means in the Imperium. It means investigations. It means rosettes. It means questions that never stop. He tried to solve spiritual rot quietly because he believed panic would spread faster than faith. He was not wrong, he was just late. The man in grey listened. Then he asked about the station confessor. Tell me exactly what was wrong with him. That question pulled me back into the concourse shrine, back into the smell of stale incense and sweat. The confessor's words were correct on the surface. Duty, purity, sacrifice, the Emperor's light. But he preached like a man tasting power, not a man carrying it. He enjoyed the fear in the room. He enjoyed how people leaned closer when he raised his voice. He enjoyed watching men break. I told the man in grey about the private meeting I saw, the one between our priest and the confessor. I did not hear the words. I only saw the change. Our priest entered steady. He left shaking. After that, he started asking permission to execute men for symbols and dreams. Not proven acts. Thoughts. The man in grey asked what I thought happened in that sacristy. I hesitated. He waited. I said the confessor showed him something. A relic. A vision. Proof of corruption. Proof of authority. Something that made our priest fear the wrong thing. The man in grey pressed a button on the Vox recorder and paused it. "Trooper," he said, "if you were standing in front of an open flame, would you argue about the match that started it?" "No, sir." He turned the recorder back on. "Then do not give me guesses," he said. "Give me sequences." So I gave him sequences. I told him about the Vox room. That was something I had not mentioned, because it did not feel dramatic. It felt like another of those small things. On the second week, before comms died fully, I was assigned to run a duty near the Vox hub. The hub was a little chamber lined with cables and prayer strips. 2 operators sat at a console under a portrait of the Emperor. A tech adept stood behind them, clicking and murmuring. That day the operators looked wrong. Not corrupted, just distracted. One of them kept turning his head slightly, as if listening to someone behind the wall. I asked if they were all right. He smiled and said the station voices were loud today. The tech adept snapped at him to focus. The operator nodded, eyes still soft, and moved his hands again. A minute later, the outbound report to the Navy escort was sent with the wrong clearance code. It was off by 1 digit. That meant the Navy could not accept it. That meant our message vanished into procedure. The tech adept blamed fatigue and ordered a rest break. The operator did not stand. He sat still and whispered, "It is better this way. Less noise." That was before the shutdown, before panic, before anyone admitted it. The cult did not cut the Vox with an explosion. It bled it slowly until it could be strangled without resistance. The man in grey asked how that happens without someone noticing. I told him what every soldier knows, but pretends not to. Because nobody respects communications until it is gone. Because the people who run it are invisible. They are not heroes with rifles. They are tired men with headphones. They get overlooked. They get replaced. They get left alone with strange sounds in old cables. That is an opening. He asked about the Militarum liaison. I laughed once, then stopped, because it sounded like madness in a white room. The liaison was a coward, but he was also a victim. After comms died, he locked himself in his office and refused to open the door. Officers shouted. The commissar threatened. The priest prayed. The door stayed shut. When we finally cut it open during the standoff, we found him alive, sitting at his desk with his hands folded like he was waiting for inspection. He had written the same sentence on a data slate over and over, all requests ARE being processed. He had carved the 8-point star into the desk, not deep, just enough to show he had done it again and again with something sharp. He looked up at us and asked if we had our requisition forms. That is what the warp does to some men. It gives them a small safe loop and they hide inside it until they vanish. The man in grey did not react. He just recorded it. Then he asked the question that hurt. What did the cult offer, Trooper? Not what it did. Not what it destroyed. What it offered. Because that is the part loyalists avoid talking about. I took a breath and told him. It offered food. Not just more food. Fresh food. Real food. The kind that smells like a life where you are not always chewing starch and guilt. It offered it with kindness, like you deserved it. Like you were not a cog. It offered rest. Workers knew maintenance tunnels where the noise was softer. They guided exhausted guardsmen there. They let them sleep without officers yelling. They placed blankets. They whispered that the war could end. It offered meaning. A lot of guardsmen die without knowing why. We do it because that is our job. The cult looked at men who had been treated as ammunition and said, "You are chosen. You are seen." It offered revenge. on the Militarum, on commanders, on the Imperium that forgets you exist until it needs you again. It told men that their suffering was not noble, it was theft. It told them the Emperor never cared, and when men started believing that, the cult did not need to force them to do anything. They volunteered. He asked me who took the offer first. The lonely, the replacements, the men who had no squad bonds yet, the ones who got mocked for praying too much or too little, the ones who got punished for small mistakes. Chaos does not always hunt the strong first. It hunts the unclaimed. Then it works upward. That was the part I had not said earlier, how it climbed the chain. It started with troopers, then it reached NCOs, then it reached the specialists. When a rifleman flips, he is one gun. When a Vox operator flips, he is a blindfold. When an engineer assistant flips, he is a dead engine. When a decay orderly flips, he is infection. By the time officers started suspecting traitors, they were looking for the wrong sort. They were looking for loud rebels. The cult was quiet professionals. The man in grey asked how the first company flipped. Second company, the one that became a barricade. I told him the detail I had been ashamed to say out loud. Second company did not flip as one. They fractured. The cult took a section of them. The rest got accused. Then the accused got cornered. Then the cornered accepted help. It was a trap built from humiliation. The colonel's order to disarm them was meant to prevent mutiny. It did the opposite. It told them they were already guilty. It isolated them. It cut them from the rest of the regiment. It made them desperate, and the cult was waiting with open arms and hidden knives. The man in grey asked about the first time a guardsman knowingly killed another guardsman for the cult. Not in confusion, not in panic. Knowingly. I remembered Dock Gate 1. The commissar's escort. A man named Sulk. I knew him. Everyone knew him because he was loud and proud and always volunteered for front duty. The commissar trusted him because he looked loyal. Sulk put a lasbolt into the commissar's back. Afterwards he did not run. He did not scream. He stood there like he had finished a chore and waited for someone to congratulate him. Then he turned and raised his weapon at the cordon and said, "Enough games." The cordon broke because half of them froze, not from fear, but from confusion. A commissar is the line. When the line is shot, the mind has nowhere to stand. Sulk walked away into the smoke, calm. That is how you know it is not just desperation anymore, it is direction. The man in grey asked why I did not shoot Sulk. Because he was in the middle of my regiment, and I still could not accept that a man could become that, I said. He nodded like he had heard it 100 times. Now, he said, "Tell me how you escaped." Slowly. So I told him the rest, the part I had cut short. About the cargo lighter, about the pilot smiling, about the armsman shooting her. He asked if I felt sympathy. I said yes. He asked why. Because she looked relieved right before she died, I said, like she had finally been told what to do. The man in grey did not write that down. He only looked at me for a long moment. Then he asked what I thought happened to the rest of the regiment. I said the honest thing. Most died. Some were taken. Some escaped and became someone else. He asked what I meant. A lot of survivors do not become loyal again, sir. They become quiet. They become men who can never sleep without hearing pipes whisper. Men who flinch at prayers. Men who hate commissars. Men who cannot stand hunger, because hunger feels like an open door. Some of those men will drift. Some will drink. Some will disappear into pilgrim traffic. Some will end up in other regiments, because the Militarum needs bodies, and paperwork forgives a lot when the war is urgent. And if the Inquisition does not catch them, some will spread the rot without meaning to. He nodded as if that answer was the only one he expected. Then he finally told me what happened to Karon Belt Station. He did not give me gore or spectacle. He gave me the one detail that mattered. The station was not destroyed, he said. It was sealed, quarantined, voided of traffic, locked behind patrol routes and codes that would change every month. A dead place, still spinning, still lit, still full of corridors that no one should walk again. They did not destroy it because it was useful as bait. That was when I understood the cruel symmetry. An Inquisitor had hidden a trap under an altar on Gethsemane in my last story. On Karon, the station itself became the trap after the fall. The Imperium learns, but it learns like a predator. It does not ask what the cost does to the prey. The man in grey stood. "One last question," he said. "If you could go back to day one, what would you do?" That question is a knife because it invites hero fantasies. I did not give him one. I said I would do 3 things. First, I would treat unexplained comfort as a threat. Fresh rations that appear from nowhere. Lucky events that feel too timed. Calm that arrives too quickly in hungry men. Those are not gifts, they are hooks. Second, I would protect the invisible roles. Vox operators, decay, engine seer assistants, Militarum clerks. Not with praise, with oversight and rotation and company presence. Isolation is where whispers sound like friends. Third, I would force the worst word into the open early. Taint. Not in a rumor. In a report. In a clear chain, even if it ended my career, even if it brought the rosette. Because once you are isolated and ashamed, you are already halfway dead. He picked up the recorder. "You understand, Trooper," he said, "that many who read your report will blame you." "Yes, sir." He paused. "And you understand that some will still need to read it." "Yes, sir." He left the room. I sat alone again and tried to make my hands stop shaking. That is the other piece people do not say. Falling to chaos is not only corruption. It is exhaustion. It is loneliness. It is shame. It is the slow training of your mind to accept the unacceptable, because you need something to make the fear stop. If you want a single image of how a whole regiment falls, I can give you one. It is not banners or daemons. It is a mess hall at 0300. A row of men eating in silence. They have stopped joking. They have stopped complaining. They have stopped writing letters. They eat, and they look down, and the only sound is chewing and distant pipes. Then one man at the end of the table smiles. Not a big smile. A small one, private, like he has just heard a good idea. He does not share it yet. He just keeps smiling while everyone else keeps eating. And that is enough. Because a day later, he will tell one other man. A day after that there will be a coin, passed hand to hand, warm from too many fingers. A day after that a Vox code will be off by 1 digit. A day after that, an airlock will accidentally cycle. A day after that, an execution will make the workers look calmer. A day after that the regiment will be aiming guns at itself, certain it is doing the Emperor's work.